Everyone, and welcome to this webinar. Thank you for being with us today. Before we begin, I'd like to just pass the floor to the program director who will say a few words, and then we can present the speakers.
So thank you very much, Maribel. Welcome, everyone. Just to welcome you. Just a few words to welcome you for this new webinar of She Votes Africa Project, which you already know about, I'm sure. Project financed by the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And this time we have the coalition of Ethiopian civil society organizations for elections on this seminar on democracy, silence partners, civil society in electoral process. What I wanted to highlight is the fact that we just came from Addis Abeba. It was we organized together with the CECOE training of trainers in April, and then this is the follow-up. It's also based on this wonderful experience that we had in Addis Abeba. So let me thank again the participant for this webinar, and then let Maribel start the webinar by introducing all our guests. So thank you so much. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Professor. I just want to welcome everyone again to today's webinar hosted in collaboration with CECOE Ethiopia and the MEPA program as part of the She Votes Africa initiative, just as Professor Gaspari explained, which is generously financed by the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. So just maybe a few words to tell you guys how this webinar was shaped. The idea was to focus on the role that is played by civil society organizations that really operate behind the scenes quietly but decisively, shaping the fairness, inclusiveness, and credibility of electoral processes. From voter education to legal reform, advocacy to digital innovation and poll observation, CSOs are really democracy's silent partners, as we call them. They are essential yet often under-recognized. So this webinar will strive to shine a light on their pivotal contribution across the entire electoral cycle, from pre-electoral groundwork to election day, to post-election accountability, and so on and so forth. So today we are privileged to welcome three speakers whose work exemplifies the breadth and impact of civic engagement. In the first place, Yishak Abebayehu, which is the Senior Program Officer at CECOE. He will address the pre-election role of civil society, drawing on his expertise in digital tools, data collection, and early engagement strategies. Then the second speaker is Eyuel Zelealem, Program Coordinator at CECOE, which will speak on post-election civic engagement, highlighting a bit more, I would say, strategies for advocacy, accountability, and democratic resilience. And finally, Dr. Franklin Oduro, Country Director from the NDI, the National Democratic Institute, which will share insights about more, I would say, the role of CSOs on election day engagement. So reflecting their role in safeguarding transparency and trust in African electoral contexts. This discussion is part of a broader commitment to supporting women's leadership, electoral integrity, and democratic participation across Africa. And again, just to reiterate, through She Votes Africa, we are trying to reaffirm this idea that amplifying civic voices, especially those of women and marginalized groups, are not only vital, but also urgent. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome you guys again, and I would like to give the floor to Dr. Yishak. Thank you for being with us.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Yishak Abebayehu, and I am a senior program officer at CECOE. And it is great to be here today. My presentation will focus on the role of civil society organization or CSOs in what they do before elections happen in the pre-election phase. Let me share my presentation. So CSOs, they often work quietly, not in the big spotlight, but they are democracy silent partners. They provide oversight and support, especially in place where government or election management bodies might not be strong or their presence is limited. They build essential trust right among regular people in communities at the grassroots level. So my presentation will highlight CSO's contribution to democratic governance, the diverse tools and methods they use, the challenge they face in the various situations, and the strategies to overcome these challenges. First, CSOs are key player in teaching citizens about being a good citizen and how to vote, why election, and so on. So they consistently reach out to left out communities where government might not be very active or presence is limited. CSOs are great at making these complicated electoral laws easy to understand. They help people learn about their rights as a citizen, fostering civic literacy, and this builds essential trust at local level. And the interesting thing is here is that they don't just do the old style of workshop anymore. They have evolved beyond the training session. Now CSOs use easy ways to share information like local radio, which is great for reaching communities with limited internet access. They also use engaging social media toolkits. This include platforms like Facebook, Telegram, TikTok campaigns, which are excellent for reaching younger audiences. In some countries, they even use mobile clinics that bring information directly to the local communities. Additionally, they are carefully simplified these electoral laws, regulations into easy, understandable in using local language. Additionally, they also target specific vulnerable group like youth, women, rural population, and persons with disabilities. So all this hard work is an effect that leads to higher voter turnout across different demographics. It will also create more engaged, capable of informed and meaningful participation across the electorate. Additionally, there is a significant reduction in invalid ballots. So this all result in increased civic literacy and participation. Let us look some examples. For example, in Kenya, in 2022 elections, CSO worked on a very successful and innovative SMS text message campaign. They knew many people had a mobile phone, even in remote areas. So these CSOs wrote concise and multi-language SMS message, and this message provided critical information on the voter registration deadlines, required document, the step involved in voting process, plus how to verify voter registration details. So by partnering with mobile network operators, they managed to send a message to over 2 million first-time voters. So this helped bridge the digital divides, provided timely information, and contributed to increase the voter turnout rates, and reduced invalid ballots, especially among youth and rural population. Another story is from my country. The CSO that I am currently working called CECOE did public awareness campaigns during the 2021 election, especially reaching over 14 million Ethiopians through mainstream media and social media. This strategy include airing more than 700 broadcast advertisement on the national and the regional radio and television, as well as we used various social media platforms a lot, like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So we have created engaging infographics, so short videos to connect with the younger digital savvy youth audience. So this presence was a key in making electoral rules clear and getting the people. So the next one is CSOs are like the intellectual and what we call it, a factual backbone of effort to reform electoral laws. They always provide data that is independent and collected very carefully. So in this role, they often push for change that is truly needed. How do they get this fact? They do election observation, surveys, legal analysis, qualitative and quantitative studies to pinpoint exactly where the systematic weaknesses are. So their findings are written in the policy briefs, shadow reports, and accessible database done. With this strong proof, actively and smartly to the parliaments, election management bodies, and policymakers. So they frequently draft model legislation, submit specific and actionable reform proposals. They also launch public awareness campaigns to create pressure and build momentum for change. So their effort in advocacy lead across different nations to the establishment of stronger legal frameworks, bring enhanced government accountability, meaning governments have to answer for their action, and all these strengthens the democratic fabric and institution. To provide some success examples, a used focus CSO called Yaga Africa in Nigeria they created a campaign called Not Too Young to Run in Nigeria to push for change and achieve legal frameworks. So the campaign started with the systematic research and documentation. This research carefully collected facts showing the exclusion of youth from political office because of the restrictive age limit in the existing laws. So armed with this proof, Young Africa began a continuous effort to advocate and lobby. Then they directly talked with the lawmakers at all levels, organized a public meeting, and started a strong social media campaign that everyone noticed, and they got a wide public support across the nation. Their consistent pressure and agreements based on the fact finally resulted in the passage of Not Too Young to Run bill in 2018. So this was a key achievement. So this law significantly lowered the age limit to run for the president from 40 to 35, for the governor from 35 to 30, and for the state assembly election from 30 to 25. CECOE, my current organization, has a successful advocacy record as well. Historically, in Ethiopia, CSOs often faced delays in getting accreditation to conduct voter registration. So this stopped them from being able to plan and carry out full and long-term voter education effectively. So CECOE presented NEVE with arguments drawing upon the international practice and highlight this the issue arised from temporary accreditation, and that this continuous effort done with the help of helpful discussion with NEVE finally led to policy change. That was introduction of permanent accreditation for CSOs, especially involved in the voter education. So this allowed CSOs to carefully plan and carry out big voter education programs well before election cycles. So let us move to pre-election monitoring. One of the areas that CSOs can do. CSOs, as we all know, CSOs send out a huge network of highly trained observers during the pre-election phase. These observers act as the independent eyes and ears on the ground. They send a report that give true unbiased picture, thereby enhancing overall the transparency of the election. So CSOs will equip them, these volunteers, with standardized checklists to gather information on the all part of the pre-election environment. So their observation activities include the voter registration, the candidate registration, the civic space and political environment, the campaign, debate, the media coverage, and so on. So this active observation help to find potential risks right away, enabling timely risk identification. So this makes sure that election preparation have a greater transparency, and it provides more accurate and impartial understanding of what is happening before election. So this in return helps in tracking action to prevent problems and strengthen public trust in electoral process. Next, conflict prevention. So CSO often become the most trusted and neutral organization that bring communities together. They are positioned to build bridges where political differences are deep. So most often they set up hotlines, create community peace observer network, use local reporting system. So this helps them quickly to spot and report raising tension or the possible violence before it breaks out. So CSOs help building upon this. CSOs help to lead neutral talk between political parties, community leaders, even security forces to calm dispute and build trust at the local level. So they actively train peace observers, community leaders, use groups, even security staff in key conflict resolution skills, and plans to stop this election violence early. So this will lead to tangible reduction in the electoral violence. They will also help improve the social unity within the community and protect the democratic space for peaceful competition. So let us see some success stories. In Ghana, the Coalition of Democratic Election Observers, CODEO, showed success in monitoring or observing what happened before election, especially on the voter registration problems during the 2018 and 2016 election. So CODEO sent out thousands of trained observers across all nations. They used standard checklists to systematically write down issues at the voter registration centers, and their observer recorded problems like duplicate registration, underage registrant, and various local logistical problems. So through direct advocacy with Electoral Commission and smart use of media, consistent public statement, CODEO successfully pressured the Electoral Commission to look into problems, and they found and implement corrective measures. And this enhanced transparency and integrity of the voter registration process. So this is one of the success story that CODEO has, and the another success story that is related to the peace building is in Ghana. CSO lead Peace Council played a vital role in stopping widespread of election-related violence during the very competitive 2020 general election. So in the pre-election time of 2020, they engaged with the conflict prevention activities they established informal but yet effective intelligence networks, direct hotlines to quickly find out and report on escalating tension, localized disputes that could potentially lead to violence. So this council also facilitated a closed-door dialogue between rival political parties at both local and national level, providing neutral and safe space for de-escalation and addressing specific grievances. Interestingly, they actively mediated community-level disputes that, if not handled, had potential to cause a wider violence. They also conducted a public education campaign promoting peaceful political discourse and active citizenship. So the success of Ghana's Peace Council in 2020 highlight the role as what we call it, a recognized mechanism for conflict prevention, significantly contributed to peaceful and credible conduct of the election. So now, even with all their contribution, CSOs working before election often face problem. So the first one is shrinking civic space. They often face restrictive laws, bureaucracy, government surveillance. So this will limit what CSOs can do. For example, in Ethiopia, before Abiy Ahmed came to power, there was a restriction on CSOs. CSO involved in voter education are prohibited from participating in election observation and vice versa. So this is the first challenge. The second one is digital repression. So the online world brings its own set of challenges. These include online censorship of CSOs content, cyber attack on their infrastructure, coordinated disinformation, campaigns designed to undermine CSOs' credibility, extensive surveillance on their digital communication. Another one is political backlash and resource constraints. CSOs often face intimidation, harassment to their staff, and this is particularly common in unstable countries, which makes long-term planning and sustained impact difficult. So the another one is lack of public trust and awareness. Sometimes they struggle to effectively reach and involve citizens. This happens because of widespread of public skepticism, intense political polarization, and a general lack of awareness about non-partisan nature, their non-partisan nature. So these are the challenges they may face, but CSOs always use a different and smart way of working. So to mitigate this challenge, the first one is coalition building. They form a strategic alliance and network with other CSOs, influential local community leaders, based organization, and international partners. So this greatly amplifies their advocacy effort and extend their reach. And the another one is the use of innovation and technology. They use technology tools for many purposes. This includes for the voter registration, for effective data collection and security channels. So this is the another strategy, and there is also another mitigation strategy, which is capacity building. They keep investing in training, in professional development for their staff and dedicated volunteers. This is crucial. And the another one is strategic communication. They develop clear, consistent, and compelling narrative about their work and tangible positive impact at the grassroots level. So,
Sorry. Thank you very much, Mr. Yishak. It was really a very interesting presentation highlighting how early engagement and digital innovation can shape a fairer electoral process. Now we're going to move a bit more to what happens after the ballots are counted, because as you excellently explained, civic responsibility doesn't end with the vote. It often intensifies. So now to explore more this post-election terrain, we would like to welcome Mr. Zelealem, Program Coordinator at CECOE, again, that will focus more on the post-electoral era. Thank you again, Mr. Yishak. It was really very interesting.
Thank you.
I'll ask you if it's okay with you to stay with us online so we can respond to questions at the end of the session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Moderator. First of all, I would like to thank the University of Sant'Anna for organizing this podcast initiative to exchange ideas and to also strengthen our collaboration. So I have prepared a brief presentation on the role of civil society organizations in post-electoral period. So to begin, when we talk about elections, we are talking about phased approach, which involves the pre-election period, the election day, and the post-election environments. So the role of civil society is encompassing all these three important periods of the electoral process. So during the post-election period, after the election day, after the votes are casted.
Sorry to interrupt, but we cannot see your PowerPoint. I know you said you were going to share something, but could you try again? Sorry.
Yes, I will share. Trying to share it. Sure how to share the screen.
It's the green button in the middle.
Okay, please share.
Perfect.
Can see it now?
Yes, perfect.
Yes. So the objectives of civil society engagement and post-elections. At first, civil society organizations can monitor post-election developments, which involve a wide variety of activities that may be conducted by the election management body or political parties or other civil society organizations or citizen groups. For instance, votes are counted after the election day, and those votes that are counted are analyzed and then made announced to the public. So the winners and the losers are announced. So that result-related issues are tracked by civil society organizations where there are irregularities in those instances. are reported to the public and to the stakeholders. Grievances, dispute resolution mechanisms that have been put in place by the election law and implemented by the electoral management body are also followed and monitored by civil society organizations. So these are post-electoral developments, some of the post-electoral developments. In addition to this, civil society organizations can also engage in mediation dispute or in case where electoral violence occur during the post. Another objective of civil societies is for advocating to bring about electoral justice. So, well, in cases where there are irregularities in relation to the voting process, to the counting process, or to the announcement of votes, of the formation of government, these CSOs advocate for the bringing of justice to the process. Dialogue, fostering dialogue among stakeholders. So political parties, contesting political parties, election management bodies, and other different types of civil society organizations might engage to form a dialogue, to have a peaceful outcome, to ensure and strengthen the legitimacy of the process. That contributes to the public trust in institutions. So
Mr. Zelealem, can you hear us? I'm guessing there's an issue with the connection. Dr. Franklin, are you with us?
Yes, I am. I suspect he may have a power trip over
Yes.
there.
In that case, maybe we're just gonna wait for 2 minutes, and if he's not back, would you be okay with taking the lead on your part?
Yes, I'm ready.
Thank you very much.
We also have a
Okay, I'm guessing it's trying to reconnect. So maybe let's just give it 2 minutes, and if it doesn't work, we'll welcome Dr. Franklin. I apologize everyone for the technical issue, and thank you for your patience. Good to have you back, Mr. Zelealem. I guess there was a technical issue. You're muted. You are muted.
yes, you can hear me. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So we lost our connection. That's why. Apologies. I will proceed with my presentation. Okay. So during this phase, observation reports are announced. So civil society organizations prepare their observation reports of the pre-election and the election day findings. So they collect the information from polling stations, from constituencies, they aggregate, analyze it, and make it announce it to the public. Doing so allows every electoral stakeholder to draw lessons from the election exercise. So based on this election observation reports, civil society organizations engage in advocacy for electoral reforms. So during the pre-election and the election day, as well as the post-election observation, there are key findings that these organizations find, gaps that's point to a room for improvements in the electoral system. It could be illegal, it could be policy, or it could be a practice within the election management bodies. It could be how political parties conduct their operations. It could be how civil societies are engaged, or how maybe registers voters, or how it's counting the votes. So based on that, advocacy efforts will be conducted during the post-election days. And another area is to contribute to the mediation and peace building. So elections are highly in situations where elections are highly contested, competitive, electoral violence might be a risk that's facing. So through peace building efforts, by engaging with community leaders, with political activists and with government stakeholders, civil society organizations can contribute to peace. One of the most another important area that they can engage is civic education. Our organizations, so CECOE, the Coalition of Civil Society Organizations for Elections in Ethiopia, is also engaged in this endeavor of providing civic education to citizens, where citizens are provided with awareness on civic engagements, on their rights and their duties, how the necessity of engaging in political engagements, processes, and also non-political engagements, active community engagement are advocated using this civic education initiatives. This is separate from the voter education that we mentioned. The last role that civil society organizations can play is human rights monitoring during the post-election period. So there might be human rights violations by state actors, by non-state actors, and how these human rights violations are occurred, how they can be reported. Civil society organizations can send their monitors, gather reports, and then submit to the appropriate agencies, national or international agencies. So during the post-election phase, there is going to be engagement with the election management bodies by providing the reports, organizing review forums, lesson learning engagements, and advocating for transparency in the dispute resolution processes and the announcement of results. They can also engage with political parties. So political parties will be encouraged during this phase to accept the legitimate results, not to resort to any violent mechanisms of during the post-election. So they have to push them. Civil society has to advocate for the acceptance of results, and if there are grievances, political parties should resort to the proper channels of grievance handling mechanisms as stipulated under the law. And civil society organizations, in addition to this, can also facilitate dialogue platforms between political parties. So during that period, political parties need to sit down, evaluate their wins, their gains, and their losses, and also prepare for the next intervention. So they need to have a dialogue, also to fix any grievances that may be there. So inclusive participation, to promote inclusive participation for the participation of women, youth, IDPs, and persons with disabilities in the next electoral period is conceived in this post-electoral engagement with political parties. So if there are areas of improvement that they need to do, civil society can advocate for more inclusion in political parties. In relation with the media is an important tool for disseminating information. So they will be trained to provide accurate information, and society can capacitate the media professionals. They can counter misinformation, disinformation, because electoral violence may occur as a result of this misinformation and disinformation in the age of digital media, the social media network. Doing so, civil societies can also promote responsible journalism. And by engaging with citizens through town hall meetings and forums, creating social media awareness and promoting peaceful responses, civil societies can engage with citizens because elections have winners and losers, and that outcome might be very dissatisfactory for citizens, and citizens might either resort to violent mechanisms, or they might be dissatisfied to engage further or lose hope in the electoral process. So through engagement with citizens, the trust of citizens on public institutions, on the election management body, and on the electoral process needs to be maintained and sustained. So civil society has a huge role to do these initiatives. The challenge, I think, more or less my colleague Yishak has explained it, but limited or limitations on the civic space, which might take different or various mechanisms, limit the engagement of civil societies. So those procedures might be attached for limiting the operations of civil society organizations. Polarizations in deeply divided societies, political polarization, ethnic polarization, religious polarization might create critical problems for the operations of civil society organizations, thereby leading to mistrust in the civil society themselves. So they might be categorized as partial to a government or to a certain political entity or to a certain religious group. So this is a huge challenge. And there are threats to CSOs personnel. So CSOs have personnel that operate in various areas of the country in different capacities. So this personnel might be threatened as a result of their operations. So they are human rights dependent by their nature, and the human rights defenders face various obstacles in carrying out their tasks. The last challenge I have identified is the limited resources and coordination gaps. So sources funding is a huge obstacle to CSOs to operations. Specifically, as you might have seen currently, with funding cuts from major international donors such as the USAID, CSOs are facing serious obstacles, and coordination gaps is also another issue where the civil societies within themselves might not be coordinated. They might issue separate reports which might be given at times conflicting. So these coordination gaps might create more problems in terms of gaining trust within the public and the election management body and other stakeholders. So coming to the strategies for effective engagement, building coalitions is a very good strategy. So having a large based coalition of civil society organizations that can comprehensively observe the whole overall electoral cycle and issue reports is a huge plus in every electoral process. Early preparations and planning for post-election scenarios is good and advisable. Crisis communication plans during post-election period is very important because the medias and even there might be crisis, and that crisis need to be communicated clearly. So, having a partners with regional and international bodies to not only to resolve the funding gaps, but also other partnerships might also occur, which are very important to the operation of civil society organizations. So as a recommendation, I have put 4 major recommendations. The first one is to institutionalize civil society's role in the reviews. So during the reviews of the election results and other post-electoral engagements, civil societies need to have an institutionalized mechanism where they can follow post-electoral developments. They have strengthening legal protection for civil society actors during the overall electoral cycle allows civil societies to engage more and contribute to the effective transparency, inclusion, and legitimacy of the electoral process. Collaboration between the civil society and electoral management bodies is critical in order to allow a smooth flow of information. Where there are irregularities, the electoral management bodies can quickly fix those irregularities, or by canceling the results or by taking the corrective measures. Another very important recommendation is to invest in civic education for the long term, because civil society organizations specializing in elections during the in-between elections should highly work in promoting the active citizenship of citizens' participation in political process. So to create that active participation of citizens, investment in this civic education endeavors should be made. Doing so will enhance the citizens' participation in electoral processes when elections come. So that's the last recommendation. So at the conclusion, civil society is a key actor in safeguarding democracy beyond the election day, and the engagement of civil society organizations is very important for bringing peace, accountability, and electoral reforms. That's my presentation briefly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zelealem. Now we turn a bit more to what is often seen as the most visible, but also the most intense moment of the electoral cycle. So election day itself. It's a day when civil society must be very vigilant, very organized, and credible. So we're honored to have Dr. Franklin Oduro with us, country director for NDI and a leading voice, I would say, on democratic governance in Africa. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Oduro. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I think I'm gonna put my video off for a while because of connectivity problem. Secondly, I don't have a presentation, so I have some speaking points that I'm gonna share some thoughts with you all. Yishak and Eyuel have talked about the pre and post, which most of the time are not seen by spectators, because what we think is the most important thing on election is the E-Day, is the polling day. But I think what happens at the pre-election phase determines what will go on election day, what I call garbage in, garbage out. And I think Yishak did a good job in trying to articulate some of the things that happen, and that civil society play a role in that. I think, as you rightly said, Maribel, the most visible part of electoral processes is the E-Day. That's when everybody comes out, and that's when things can go bad and can also go right, depending on how it's organized. And that is where we also see another critical role of civil society in terms of contributing to having an inclusive, credible, and a peaceful election outcomes. That increasingly, in the continent of Africa, and I guess globally, we've come to see the importance of having an independent, non-partisan, what we call citizens election observer groups, to be able to complement the role of election management bodies. And I think that's what civil society have been doing over the years. There are three big, values that civil society bring on election day. One is ensuring that the rights of citizens to exercise their franchise is respected and upheld during the day. And that is very important, because the element of ensuring that the vulnerable, the marginalized communities are given the same treatment as everyone usually is conferred on civil society, to ensure that election pool officials, go and then respect whatever the law says. So I think it's very, very important. So if you take a look at some of the observation checklist instruments that civil society use, observer groups, you will see critical questions around, for example, where elderly people given the same opportunity to exercise their franchise on election day, where these people with disability had access to the polling station to exercise their franchise on that day, where people who are sort of come from difficult to rich areas. So one of the things that we always don't pay attention, we think the election happens in the urban areas, but the remote areas, the difficult to rich areas, how do we ensure that they also have the ability to exercise their rights? So one aspect is that respect of the right of citizens to exercise their franchise. The second value that on election day civil society bring is complementing the work of the election management body in ensuring that the electoral processes are run smoothly. Most of the time, most election management bodies recruit short-term people to perform duties on election day. So the leadership of election management bodies usually are not in the field to see that whatever training they give to these polling officials are being implemented. And it's up to civil society group, citizen selection observer groups that actually monitor and observe the compliance of the rules and regulations. And I'll give a bit of examples. You'll see that in some places that we have seen in our work that, polling officials will not come on time to open the polling stations, or they will close earlier than the time allotted for that. And the implication for that is that it has implication for citizens or voters to come. If you don't open on time and then you close early, then people who want to come and exercise their vote will not have the chance to do that. So part of the role of citizens election observers is to ensure compliance of the rules of polling. And the third important thing that I want to share will be issues around transparency and verification of results outcomes. And then increasingly, you will see that observer groups are adopting a more scientific way of verifying results outcomes, what has become known in election observation as the para verification and transparency results, item we used to call PVT, the para vote tabulation, but it's now transformed to a more process verification and transparency of results. And I think if you look at one of the causes of post-election violence, especially on that continent where we work in Africa, it's usually come from disputes of results that come after polling. And by introducing this kind of mechanisms, civil society has been able to contribute to reducing the tension and the triggers of election violence, because that tool that is available to observer groups enable independent verification of results process. So even if the election board or management body is doing something fishy, that scientific approach is able to unearth some wrongdoings happening on election day. Let me move to and give some typical examples of how some of these things have worked. So for example, if you go to Ghana, where observer groups, Yishak talk about CODEO, the Coalition of Domestic Election Observers in Ghana, giving examples. Part of what they have tried to do since 2008 is consistently employing this systematic election observation on election day, which enables them to track the quality of the electoral processes throughout the country based on scientific statistical deployment of observers, so that every corner of the country will have representation. And in 2020, for example, there was an instance where the election management board was trying to project low voter turnout in the public, which was not the case actually, because that was, some people were seen as a manipulation of the data. But the CODEO, for example, through the PVT, was able to show that the actual voter turnout was more than what the election board was trying to project. And by using that information and informing the election board that the data we have is different from what you have, the election board went back to their data, they came back and then corrected this in the public media and said, oh, we made a mistake. And this is the actual data. If you move to Nigeria, where I had been part of some of those PVRT, the work that Yaga Africa, for example, Transition Monitoring Group, TMG, were able to do with this kind of methodology helped the election board in 2019 election, where there was a contestation of results, but the election board had to rely on civil society data to confirm whether the data they were receiving from their officials from the field were consistent, were accurate, so that gave them the confidence to go out to announce the outcome of the result, because they realized that there was an independent verification of results. When you move to Sierra Leone, the recent election, which created more confusion, that the citizens group, the domestic observer groups there was able to show that the data that the election management board has collated was not consistent with what was on the ground, and actually came out with a statement to say that the outcome of the election as announced by the election board did not reflect what the election board had announced. But obviously, the statement was it was not accepted by them. They were even chased out from the country, and that's some of the challenges that we face in the work that we do. And if you come to Kenya, for example, there is a series of examples that election observation group ELOG had been able to do using election day observation to help the election dispute that occurred in the courts. One critical role that, by doing this systematic statistical-based observation, what we call putting boots on the ground or watching the vote, has been able to do is the ability of the data produced by observer groups on election day to be used even at the law courts. I know that in the 2012 election presidential dispute in Ghana, the information, the reports, the data from the domestic group was cited in the courts, was used as evidence as part of the litigants who were doing that. The same thing in Nigeria and the same thing in Kenya. So increasingly, we are seeing the significance of what civil society can do on election day. Watching the vote, that has become a popular phrase, that we are watching the vote to make sure that it's consistent with the laws or the electoral laws that that we need to apply to ensure that there's inclusivity in terms of the polling process, and to ensure that there is some credibility in terms of results outcomes. I know we've gone past the time, but so I'm going to wrap up, and then maybe if there are Q&A, we can discuss more. But I just want to end by giving a couple of challenges that we face on election day. Although there are some the good values, but I think the credibility, the impartiality of observer groups is very fundamental. To what extent that the citizens election observer groups represent the face of the country? Is it skewed in favor of certain group or certain section? Does the ordinary person, when they see that coalition, see themselves being represented? Unfortunately, in many times, that is lacking on the part of observer groups. The second thing is the challenge with the credibility of the reports that sometimes we issue without verification and sensational. And then the third related thing is the challenge that we always find as to when do we not do no harm principle. When after we find some findings, when do we have to go out and say it, or when do we don't have to go out? When we go out, is it going to escalate the tension and cause more trouble, or we should keep it? And that's the dilemma that constantly we face in terms of how do we ensure that the work we do on election day to affect the outcomes is done in a way that is subjective, is transparent, but it also has a do no harm principle embedded in the work we do. Let me pause here, and then maybe we can have more conversation with Q&A.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oduro, for grounding us in the high stakes work that unfolds on election day, and for showing more or less how civil society strengthens trust even under pressure. I'd like to now open the Q&A. I'm going to start with a question that was in the chat box, and that will give you all the time to send in your questions. So we have here a question from Gakenosi. I'd like to ask the panelists if you are okay with that to turn on your cameras, just so that you could respond to the questions that are addressed to you. So one question in particular is for Mr. Yishak. How do you ensure the impartiality of the CSOs? How do you ensure the effectiveness and the fact that they capture more or less the electorate's confidence? So that's the question from Gakinozi. Mr. Yishak, would you like me to repeat the question? You are muted, yeah.
Can you please repeat the question for me?
Mr. Zelealem and Dr. Franklin, if you could turn on your cameras kindly, that would be okay. I mean, Dr. Franklin, I know you have a technical issue, but maybe Mr. Zelealem. So the question to you, Dr. Yishak, was how do you ensure more or less the impartiality of CSOs? So Gakinozi was asking more or less about first who sponsors CSOs, so who finances them, and how do you ensure that CSOs are impartial? So more or less independent.
Okay, thank you for the question. So ensuring the impartiality of CSOs is crucial for their credibility, effectiveness, and ability to serve the public. So I think let me give 2 or 3 key ways to ensure their impartiality. The first one is their governance and internal policies. They should have clear mission and value, conflict interest policies, and transparent decision-making processes. So these are strong governance and internal policies. So the second one is financial transparency. So they should have disclosure their funding and so on. And the last one is the accountability mechanism. So they should actively involve affected communities and beneficiaries in the design, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation of their program. So these are, I think, key ways to ensure their impartiality.
Thank you, Dr. Yishak. Dr. Franklin, I have another question to you. So how can we decentralize the complete election system and keep the system transparent? And also, how could we stop communal violence in elections? So I guess it's a double-edged sword here in this question. So the question is really focused on how it's possible to mitigate violence, more or less, I would guess, on election day here, and also how they can decentralize more or less the electoral system.
Thank you. I don't know if my video is on. I'm not too sure if you can see me, but I I think it's dark somehow.
If you want to turn it off, that's fine, because
Yeah.
there's a technical issue.
Okay. No, I think that those are two good questions. So in terms of mitigating election violence, and I want to go back to Yishak presentation of the pre-election. I think usually what triggers election violence on election day starts from the pre-election phase. So in terms of voter registration element, to what extent that people are excluded from the registration processes, to what extent that competitors or people who are trying to compete, I mean, that we are seeing some signs, for example, as we speak, in the election that is coming up in Tanzania in a couple of months now, where deliberately there has been some restriction to opposition candidates contesting the elections. So exclusion, the issues around inclusivity in terms of voter registration, deliberately preventing people from registering, because if you don't register, you cannot vote. So that is what usually triggers what election violence are. But more importantly, in terms of E-Day trigger of violence, it is the transparency and credibility of the results. And one way that we could prevent that is the kind of work that CSOs have been doing with the process results transparency verification, the PRVT, to enable election management board members, but also political parties to be assured that there's independent organization that is also tracking, the results as they are collated. So if there's something that is inconsistent with the way the results are tracked, we are ready to share that information. And I think that has become a popular tool for observer groups, especially in the presidential system of elections, because the tool, the method is more applicable in that electoral system. So that's one way, is the deterrent. And more importantly, the confidence that citizens have that the presence of observers will ensure that compliance and the right thing is done. These are some of the measures. But more for me, I think if we get the pre-election phase right, we are less, anticipating conflicts or violence during election day. But most of the time, we don't get the pre-election phase right, and that usually, comes together and do that. In terms of decentralization of elections, I'm not too sure if I understand the question well, but the conduct of elections, is done throughout the country. So there are branches and structures, and elections are polling processes are conducted at the minute level, what we call the polling station, which is at the community level. I think there are two things what we see in the election process. One is that there's too much centralization of the election management bodies, which gives very little room to the structures on the ground. So every decision, everything will have to come from the center. But there's a reason for that, so that there's consistency of the application of the laws. Because if you give too much room to decentralization, then officials can choose to do what they want, and that could be detrimental to how elections are conducted in a consistent manner. So best practices with election is to have rules that are applicable throughout wherever you are, not pick and choose. But that will also mean that you strengthen the capacity of the localized structures of the election management bodies so that they can understand the rules and apply them accordingly.
Thank you, Dr. Franklin. We have here also another question for Dr. Zelealem. In the meantime, I'd like to remind you all that you can just raise your hands, and that way we can unmute your microphones if you'd like to ask the questions personally to the speakers. Otherwise, we have a question from Dita. How does the level of cooperation between CSOs and EMBs in civic and voter education or other CSO initiatives influence the overall effectiveness of these efforts? And she's also asking what are the potential advantages and drawbacks of such a collaboration from the perspective of both civil society organizations and electoral management bodies.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a good question. So in terms of civic and voter education, collaboration is important between the civil society organizations and the electoral management bodies. So specifically in voter education is a form of engaging with citizens on the process, the rights and procedures of during elections. So what is required for a voter to register, and what are the procedures and the rights and the duties of voters. So in terms of communicating that, voter education is usually made when election time or election period approach. So mostly voter education is dependent on the directive or the rules that are made by the electoral management body. So when civil societies get that information from election management body, they tend to propagate that information or education appropriately, which enhances the turnout of voters during registration and also voting. So the collaboration between CSOs and electoral management bodies creates better outreach for any in the education level. So if civil societies have stronger networks, specifically at the grassroots level, they can reach to marginalized groups, and through their collaboration, they can enrich their outreach. And another influence is credibility and trust. So CSOs, if they can acquire greater trust among the public, they can, since they are not state police, if they work on the trust of the citizens, they can gain access and also issue civic education and political education. So another one is resource sharing. So by jointly collaborating, civil societies and electoral management bodies can avoid duplication of efforts. So in areas that civil society organizations are working in, civic and voter education, the state body or the electoral management body might not be highly engaged in. Coming to the potential advantage and disadvantage, so the collaboration is really important for civil society organizations. They can, through the collaboration, they can access the official materials or the rules or the directives for providing civic and voter education. And they can, by doing so, they can enhance the legitimacy of their civic and voter education program. So if they cannot provide the correct information, then the program is by itself going to be misleading. So it will influence negatively their trust. So by basing their programs on the materials that are communicated by the ENBs, civil societies can enhance their trust. They can also gain opportunities for capacity building. So the electoral management body can support the civil society organizations at the grassroots level to engage in civic and voter education. So they can benefit from the capacity building, and they can also achieve funding opportunities. If the electoral management body has a pool of funding, they can wire it to the civil society organizations to engage in civic and voter education. The electoral management bodies gates wider civil society organizations that are situated at the grassroots level, who can provide the voter and civic education through multiple languages to different variety of social segments. So some might specialize on educating women, some might focus on young people, the others might focus on first-time voters. So by targeting diversified targets, civil society organizations can support electoral management bodies. So another opportunity for EMBs is that they build civil society engagement, builds trust, specifically in communities that are to some extent skeptical of the EMBs or state bodies. So if there are trusted civil society organizations, which might be faith-based organizations, community-based organizations, who might have more trust or better trust than the EMB, as a result of that, they can gain trust. By doing so, they can also have greater community engagement and the civil society organization's capacity to use innovative approaches to provide civic and voter education, and their flexibility will allow EMBs to reach more deeper into excluded segments of society. So civil society and EMBs engagement is very important. Potential drawbacks. So in terms of the potential drawbacks, as been rightly mentioned by Dr. Franklin, public trust on organizations or on institutions is very important. If there is a perceived loss of independence from the side of the EMBs or as well as the civil society organizations, their joint efforts might not bear the desired fruits. In fact, it might become a hurdle to their future operations. Another issue is political pressures. so the civil society organizations might be co-opted by the ruling parties or the organizations that are aligned with the EMBs, so that they cannot conduct their operations effectively. Another important obstacle is related to finance. I think I saw a question in the comments section is related to finance. So in relation to finance, mostly election-based organizations face significant challenge in terms of getting finance to provide civic and voter education during periods that are where there is no election. So that might create significant gaps for civil society organizations. For EMBs, as a result of that collaboration, it's not managed well. The EMBs might lose message, the civic and the contents of the civic and voter education. So some civil society organizations might engage in disseminating inaccurate or message that's not properly in line with the directives that the EMBs has issued. These are some of the advantages and the disadvantages of the collaboration that might arise between civil society and EMBs. I hope that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Zelealem. So we have one final question for Dr. Oduro. So it's a twofold question. So the first part is, what systems can be put in place for CSOs to respond quickly on election day when they witness violations or disruptions? And also another question is, with increasing numbers of observation missions, how can CSOs avoid redundancy and ensure that their unique value is recognized?
No, thanks. So one of the ways that to answer the first question in terms of being proactive on election day to mitigate challenges. So increasingly, civil society and election observation has moved from the traditional paper-based monitoring and reporting to using a technology-based and speed. So today, unlike when I started doing this work in early 2000 back in Ghana, where you wait after 1 week, then you get your report from the remote areas, and then you do your analysis and report. Today, there's a speed. Civil society or election observers are able to get instant reporting at any time. Something that NDI has been supporting civil society partners around the world using what we call the Apollo system to track and report instantly, which enables civil society observers to be able to issue periodic statements during the day. So that enables election management bodies to be aware of what is going on, and if there's any prevention that can be done, immediately is done. Here in Ethiopia, for example, I know that CECOE, in the last election, built stronger relationship with the election board where they were able to call election boards. So, for example, in situation where some of the observers of CECOE were arrested or prevented from observing, they were immediately called. They could relate this information to election board, and immediately election board from Addis Ababa acted. And then these people were asked to observe. So we have gone past late reporting to putting systems, including establishing some communication relationship with election authorities, with security agencies, to be able for us to share information privately so that they can mitigate issues. The related to that briefly is that citizen selection observation has also moved away from being dormant on polling day to being proactive, where we could also correct things happening at the polling station. If you have good relationship with the election board or election management board and you have accreditation, observer groups are able to point to polling officials about infractions or irregularities that are going on that should be attended to. So all of these things are measures that revolutionary means in election observation had brought to the way that we can mitigate some of those things on, and we don't wait to the end. In terms of redundancy, that's a very good point. I think one of the things that we are seeing in this field is that you have multiple election observers that proper on election day. Some are partisan observers. They are propped by political parties. Some are what we call the gongos, the governmental, backed organizations that do the bidding of the regime. So you have many of these groups that occupy the space with independent, non-partisan observer groups like CECOE. So how do we mitigate redundancy, and how do we ensure that the information is not conflictual? Unfortunately, we see a lot of that in many of our countries where you have loggerheads, so, different civil society groups issues statements that are contradictory, and that confuses the public and say, okay, you guys say you are independent. Why is it that one group is saying this, one group is saying that? We saw a little bit of that in Nigeria in 2019 and even in 2023 elections, where there was some kind of conflict between civil society observer groups. I think one way to mitigate that is for a more coordinated, complementary role of observer groups, in a way that we share information about our methodologies, we share information among ourselves about deployment strategies, so that we can avoid duplication, and then we can make sure that the whole country is covered. I mean, take, for example, Ethiopia. There's 50,000 polling stations. There's no way CECOE is going to have resources to recruit 50,000 polling stations. I mean, observers? No. I mean, the funding is there, as both of them have talked about. So there's a need to coordinate and complement the way we do, share information about methodologies, ensure that we don't see 2 or 3 observers at one polling station when we could spread ourselves out. So information sharing is key. It's one way to reduce the redundancy and to ensure that there's efficiency and coordination in the work that we do.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oduro, and thank you again for all our speakers, Dr. Abebayehu, Dr. Zelealem, and Dr. Oduro, for sharing such powerful insights across the electoral cycle. I think today's discussion really reaffirmed that civil society organizations are not peripheral actors, but really foundational, I would say, to electoral integrity, especially since we actually looked at the whole electoral cycle, going from the pre-election preparation to post-election accountability and, of course, election day vigilance. As we've seen, I think the challenges are growing. So you talked about digital repression, shrinking civic space, political resistance, but so is the innovation and resilience of civic actors across Africa and beyond. On behalf of the MEPA program and the CECOE Ethiopia, thank you for your presence and participation for everyone. Let's continue building electoral processes that are not only technically strong, but really people-centered. Thank you again for everyone, and I hope you all have a nice weekend.